In today's video, I want to give you guys an in-depth dive of everything we know about The Last of Us Part 2 so far, the important bits of information to really get you caught up to speed ahead of the February 21st release date. Obviously, as we get closer to the release, more information is going to trickle out, but I think at this point, we know a lot about the game, and honestly, I would prefer from a personal standpoint to be left in the dark about everything else that The Last of Us Part 2 has to offer, because there is this sense of the unknown in The Last of Us Part 2 that I want to keep intact. And I feel like a lot of other games these days show off way too much gameplay and information ahead of a release. Whereas a game like The Last of Us Part 2, yes, we have a bit of information, but at this point, we're sold on the game. Everybody and their mother is going to be buying the game. Keep us in the dark a little bit, but again, there is quite a bit to go over, and I'll leave links to various articles in the description box below from PlayStation Blog, IGN, GameSpot. They've got a lot of in-depth articles that you guys should check out if you want an even deeper look. Nonetheless, the demo that a lot of outlets got to play showcased a lot about the game. Specifically, the demo introduced two different settings for the game: Jackson, Wyoming, and Seattle, Washington, a location previously teased in past trailers as well, so that was kind of indicated to be in the game from the get-go. Jackson, in particular, is the site of Ellie and Joel's home at the start of the sequel, and throughout this demo, there were a lot of interesting gameplay mechanics that were introduced. Specifically, right away, Ellie can still pick up various items and notes around the world, though they have much greater fidelity and detail this time around. And Ellie herself is a lot different than Joel. Ellie is more limber than Joel ever was. Players can now jump to reach higher vantage points or cross small gaps, so you can see from a gameplay style, comparatively speaking, playing as Ellie comparatively speaking to playing as Joel is gonna be a little bit different. And one of Ellie's most potent new abilities allows her to dodge incoming close quarters attacks, step out of the way of survivors' axe swings, or slashing runners with a quick button tap. Obviously, Ellie is a little bit smaller in stature, so utilizing different gameplay mechanics to make it seem a little bit more realistic seems to be something that was imperative to the design of the game, and dodging in particular was especially handy when evading surprise stalker attacks. The new feature was said to feel satisfyingly empowering, but also necessary considering how enemies seem smarter and harder to predict, so they're even putting more emphasis in terms of designing the enemies and making them feel a little bit more realistic. As far as Ellie is concerned, you can also crawl. Ellie can now drop to the ground by holding circle. This is useful for quickly breaking the line of sight with enemies, crawling through small passages, or keeping a low profile in general. The latter stealthy application is invaluable. Slinking through tall grass to get the drop on passing enemies and evading pursuers is critical with The Last of Us Part 2's new analog stealth system, and again, the element of stealth is going to be a lot more important and abundant in Last of Us Part 2. You are going to have some stealth elements in the game, and hiding yourself in plain sight among the tall grass is simultaneously liberating and harrowing, as blowing your cover could mean being fully exposed. There's going to be that suspense. There's going to be a lot of tension throughout the game that should just make the game overall a lot more immersive and engrossing. There's also an incredible attention to detail that couples with the gameplay elements of the game to make it a lot more realistic. IGN specifically noted when Ellie first gets handed a Molotov cocktail bottle by Dina, the player can rotate the bottle, and if you notice in Ellie's hand, the liquid is actually going to be moving realistically. I find little attention to detail like that Naughty Dog does so well, and just makes the overall game more immersive and more realistic. You don't want to break that idea of you're actually in the game, so to have it be super realistic, super responsive to everything that you do in the game, I feel like that does add another layer to the overall immersion in the game. Also noted by them was when Ellie and Dina are exploring another survivor's weed den, they stumble upon some VHS tapes. One is named with a clear Crash Bandicoot pun, Smash Brandy's Cooch. Obviously, Crash Bandicoot was one of those franchises that Naughty Dog did way back in the day. Who knows if it'll ever see a revival, but nonetheless, cool to see them throw callbacks to their other works. They did this in Uncharted 4, I believe, where there was also a demo and you could play a level out of Crash Bandicoot directly in the game. I think that's always cool, and again, a little extra attention to detail. But going back on the gameplay and some of the gameplay elements, there are going to be new infected in the game. Shamblers are horrifying walking creatures that spray gaseous acid when they get near you and take a ton of damage. Once defeated, these festering threats explode with violent force. They're faster than they look and are awful to look at. Proceed with caution whenever you find them. Obviously, there's going to be other new infected. We're just kept in the dark about some of them. And also, you've got a lot of expanded abilities. Supplements can still be collected to unlock abilities. New to The Last of Us Part 2, players can choose from multiple skill upgrade paths to customize Ellie to their playstyle, and we get to see some of those in action. Survival focuses on improving health, expanding listen modes, rage, and throw distance. Crafting lets her create melee upgrades, add smoke to stun bombs, and increase her crafting speed. Stealth improves prone movement speed, speeds up stealth kills, skills and unlocks pistol silencers. So there's a lot of decision making in how you expand Ellie's abilities, and everything is gonna also suit a different playstyle. That also lends the game to be a little bit replayable, because based on everything that we've been suggested thus far, it seems like the game is really gonna offer you a lot of different ways to tackle specific scenarios. So that's always something a little bit cooler introduced to the game, because it will be a little replayable if you want even more playtime out of the game. And speaking of playtime, that naturally lends me to my next point, in that Naughty Dog says that The Last of Us Part 2 is without a doubt their most ambitious and biggest project to date. Now, does that really say a lot? I mean, if you're a big developer, if you are an ambitious and top tier game studio, your next game should always be your biggest. But just how big is The Last of Us Part 2? Well, it's said to be about 50% bigger than the original game. Naughty Dog narrative lead Haley Gross spoke a little bit about the game and mentioned, the game I think we're saying is about 50% bigger, but it is massive, but not just in length, but in like all of our levels are bigger and wider. We have more cinematics, we have more characters, we have more animations, we have a larger melee systems in every way. This game is bigger and better. The Last of Us Part 1 took around 13 to 15 hours to complete. That's if you naturally went through the game. I'm sure if you really took your time, you could extend the playtime a little bit more. If you rushed through the game, you could shorten it a little bit more, but naturally speaking, if you're going through it for a first playthrough, 13 to 15 hours, so 50% bigger than that would mean that The Last of Us Part 2 would be around 20 to 23 hours, and that would be a rather lengthy Naughty Dog experience. Of course, the Naughty Dog games are known for being incredibly well-paced games. These aren't games that just have padded content for the sake of having extra content so they can say, oh, this is a 30, 40, 50-hour game. No, they make the game incredibly well-paced, so every time you do something in the game, it feels meaningful, it feels impactful, it feels like time well spent. It's not just another fetch quest here or there that's not going to add any context to the story. Even with the side content and optional content that's in the game and available for a limited period of time whenever you're in certain areas, I imagine that content like that is going to be inherently impactful to the context and the world of the game, whether it be fleshing out one of the side characters, whether it be giving you extra information about the world, whatever it may be. Every little thing you do is going to add to the overall lore and context of the world, and Naughty Dog has always done a great job in that, where I would suggest that a lot of other open world games, and by the way, this is not an open world game, however, it is going to be more open than other Naughty Dog games, but a lot of open world games this generation just add a lot of meaningless content for the sake of having content and saying, oh, you can spend so many hours playing this game, and that's cool and fine and all. I mean, if you spend $60 on a game, you do want to have a reasonable amount of longevity to a game, but at some point it is a little bit of a hindrance to games, and we've seen that with a lot of games that have gone open world this generation. Franchises that formerly weren't open world, or games in general that probably would have been better fit to be a more linear experience. The open world aspect of the game probably hindered the game more than it helped it. Nonetheless, also adding to the larger single player campaign, it being 50% bigger than the original game, and it being this large ambitious project, it should also be noted that The Last of Us Part 2 is not going to have a multiplayer component. At least not from the get-go. Maybe there will be a standalone Last of Us multiplayer game or whatever the case may be, but they've confirmed that they're entirely focusing on The Last of Us Part 2 from a single player standpoint and making that single player as good as possible. I do think this is a little bit of a bummer, because The Last of Us 1 did have a great multiplayer component. I enjoyed it. Was it the best multiplayer experience in the world? No, and I think the single player is still the standout. However, if they think that foregoing on multiplayer is going to offer them the ability to make the best single player experience possible, I am all for this. Naughty Dog is known for their single player experiences. People go into Uncharted 4 to play the single player. People went into The Last of Us to play the single player. Was the multiplayer a nice addition? Absolutely, but if they have to forego on that to make the single player as good as possible, to make it as robust as possible, to have the most amount of engaging content as possible, engaging should be the imperative word there, not just content, engaging content, compelling content, then I am all for it. And I want to end this by saying that The Last of Us Part 2 is noted to be released on 2 discs, so yes, even as a single player experience, the gravitas of this game, the magnitude of this game, how big this game is, does warrant it to have 2 separate discs. To give you guys a comparison point, Red Dead Redemption 2 was on 2 separate discs. Red Dead Redemption 2 is an enormous game, far bigger than The Last of Us Part 2 is probably going to be. However, The Last of Us Part 2, with all of its detail, with all of the areas in the game being so well crafted, obviously it is going to need a little bit of extra storage space, whatever it be. Even if it's 100 gigabytes, this is the kind of game you do clear out your hard drive for, and you install the game anyway. So those are a lot of details about The Last of Us Part 2. I didn't go over absolutely everything, a lot of the minute details. However, I did cover a lot of the details that you guys should be noteful of, especially the gameplay refinement, a lot of the elements like the length of the game being a lot longer, the content being more abundant. However, they're still absolutely going for a game that is very well paced, and they are foregoing on multiplayer multiplayer content to craft a better single player component. I know that some people are going to be upset by that. I think ultimately we are going to get a high quality game come February 21st. I should also note a litany of different editions are available for the game as well. You've got the standard edition for $59.99. You've got the special edition. You've got the Uber edition. I don't even know what to call it, but it's $250 and has a replica Ellie backpack. For those of you guys that are interested in stuff like that, you probably are already aware of that. But nonetheless, that's going to conclude this video. Definitely let me know all of your thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2 in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.